No more overshare.
Welcome. We are live for what is the first, I guess, a reincarnation of our guild-wide events, but our first Atelier. We'll get into what that actually means, but we're actually doing this in two parts today. There's a morning session and there's an afternoon session, partly because we have two amazing people that know a lot about this subject, and so we thought we'd spread the wealth. And partly because I know a lot of people have said, look, I'm in Australia, or I'm in Singapore, or I'm in Toronto. I cannot make that session. And so we've tried to spread it out over 2 different hours. And so my hope is this accommodates you. As mentioned, it's like my computer just shut down this morning, so I'm on a 2015 version of an Apple. So let's see if the tech works for me today, but we'll persevere. And we're actually going to have a couple of different pieces of technology. So my hope is we'll throw something up on screen. Some of you might have done this ahead of time. There is an app from Splash, or it's called Splash from Lumina. And so if you have a chance as we go through the first 5 or 10 minutes to actually pop that up, if you haven't done it, great. And if you haven't, we can work around it regardless. And then secondly, we have Mentimeter. We want to create a couple of different artifacts out of today. And so we would love for you to actually jump on a URL that we'll show you in a minute. And let's see if I can pop the right presentation up. And Rob, now I'm powerless in terms of bringing people in. So hopefully you can just do the good yeoman's work of that. We're talking resilience today, and my hope is it's an interactive conversation. We have somebody that across the guild I would view as at least top 5, if not top 2 talent in terms of being able to talk about this. And I think it's probably fair time to actually probably have this discussion. Now, we've called these Ateliers. Our attempt is to do this every single month, to have a guild-wide event with a central theme that's relevant. Anybody, any of our co-hosts, what does atelier mean in French? Somebody nailed it yesterday. I missed it. Somebody said something.
Yeah, workshop.
Excellent. I love it. That would give you 2 Swan points, I think, in our on our little Swan coin data.
Oh, we get gamification too. Fantastic. Okay.
It's French for workshop or laboratory, and it tended to be part of artistic kind of turn of the century, or if not earlier. We've kind of at least charitably embraced it in terms of all of the stuff that we talk about in the guild, but we think it's appropriate. We'd love to actually produce something out of these discussions, and so we're going to talk about 4 things at the end of this discussion that hopefully this can turn into. So we still have people coming in, which is great. So why resilience? Maybe we'll get somebody from our crowd to chime in. Why do you think resilience is a good topic to be talking about? Anybody want to weigh in?
Well, Sean, in times of great stress, if you spend a year being very even and all of a sudden get uneven, the difference between happiness and sadness must be your ability to be resilient. If you're feeling not like the way you want to feel, perhaps we should explore more about resilience. That's what I was thinking about last night.
That's a good way to start us off. I think certainly we've had about 15 months of the COVID in at least my part of the world. And candidly, I'm probably feeling as low about the pandemic as I probably have been in a while. And so I don't know, we're going to talk about bounces in a minute. I'm probably close to needing my bounce. So, but we're going to persevere regardless. Certainly the term itself, you know, Google never lies, right? If you look at the term itself, it's had a really good 15 or 20 year ride in terms of being used. So it just wasn't COVID that brought on the term resilience. Certainly this is being an increasing and emerging part of a discussion that people are having. One of my favorite, I would even venture to say one of my favorite podcasts in the world is Guy Raz. He does this show about entrepreneurs called How I Built This. And he had an entire series about resilience. I listened to all of them and just how entrepreneurs were dealing with things. And so not only do we have to be resilient as people, we have to be resilient as businesses. And so really good series if you get a chance. New York Times just 2 days ago had this land on their one of their pages, just an opinion in terms of, you know, really thinking deeply about how, you know, resilience will hopefully turn the corner on how we're feeling about COVID and the pandemic and all the things that are going on, regardless of which part of the world we're in. We'll probably debunk some of the myths in terms of what resilience is today, but certainly there's a measure of hope. I've already got my first vaccination, so I think there is at least a little bit of a light in the tunnel. But I think for other people, certainly if you're in India, Brazil, if I read the headlines correctly, you might be in a completely other place in terms of just resilience right now. This I found fascinating. So, turn back the clock to March 2020, the shock of it all. And certainly we required some resilience just to get off the canvas, get our businesses back in motion again. But if you look at a 4-year difference between 2019, and these are US statistics, and 2021, we have 4 times as much symptoms of either anxiety or depressive disorder. And this is actually increased since the fall. And so, maybe what I'm feeling right now in terms of my little bounce is maybe being shared by other people. And certainly sometimes people go, well, depression and anxiety, that's for other people. Fully 80% of people say they've had some type of stress in their lives based on what's happened in the pandemic. And so part of resilience may be the other side of the quarter of that. And Rob, I know there's a couple of people still trying to get in. At least I see at the top of my my ledger there, if you can just help us out there. And so Louise, who I'll introduce more formally right now, surfaced this quote: "We discover resilience only when we're forced to face the unavoidable suffering full in the face." And so Marcus Buckingham, really interesting commentator. And my hope is, with no further ado, I'll then introduce Louise, and hopefully you can provide some perspective on that comment. I know Louise is a recent member of the Guild, but certainly accomplished with a massively interesting pedigree. She spends at least time in a pre-COVID world between Cape Town and London. She has kind of worn a number of different hairnets in her lifetime in terms of both venture life, in terms of executive placement, and then she struck out on her own, I guess about 15 years ago, and runs a company called Mowbray by Design. And so I'll probably not do justice to the company, Louise. Welcome, first of all, and tell us maybe what Mowbray by Design is all about and your orientation on the subject today.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks for the hairnet introduction. I needed that. Yeah, I founded Mowbray by Design. In fact, I just turned 16, and Augustine, you sent me a little congratulations, and I said it's pretty interesting being a teenager, especially during a pandemic. So hopefully we'll get over these teenage years. But I specialize in conscious leadership and business. And I retrained as a conscious leadership coach in 2010 and found myself in Boston in 2012 at the 4th annual Conscious Capitalism Conference. It's quite a mouthful. And realized that it just made perfect sense to me. And since then, I've also trained in future systems, design thinking, that type of thing, just, I guess, because I'm kind of curious about making sense of the world. And I work with all sorts of clients pretty much around the world, time permitting. And leadership teams, leaders, work a lot on culture of innovation, that type of thing. And what interested me most about this topic last year, it's the first time I really dug into it. I think it's the first time a lot of us dug into resilience. But we all recognize straight away that it's something that we needed more of. And unlike a personality trait, we can't measure for it. We can't really say exactly what it is, other than it's a little like a muscle. The more we do little things to help ourselves, the better we get at it, or the stronger the muscle becomes. And I started doing some research into this, and we developed some programs around resilience. I'm a practitioner for Lumina Learning, which is based on the psychological Big Five and Jung. And we developed some programs around this. And of course, the digging into it was pretty interesting. And already by about April last year, there was some massive research going on around the world into all things mental health. And I think even at that time, by September, we were looking at a sort of an average of about 40% of people who were employed. So that's not counting people who perhaps had been made redundant or lost their job in some way, or perhaps sitting at home on half salary, were experiencing at any point in time some level of mental health issues across the board. And what interested me about that was just dealing with people day to day and having really, for the first time, I guess, being super conscious about not knowing, typically when we work with people or we deal with people or we, fill our cars up or pay at a cashier for something in a supermarket, we don't really concern ourselves too much with where people are from a mental health perspective, unless there's something rather threatening or bizarre going on. But I just found, I don't know if you found the same thing, that I became super conscious about how I was delivering what I was delivering, being more conscious of taking care of the other, complete strangers, people on Zooms, endless Zooms as we've all experienced, because I just knew, scratched the surface and a couple of really strange things happened. People would burst into tears at odd moments, or, get really angry about stuff that perhaps might not normally happen. It was just happening a lot more. So I think what it developed for me was a deepening of compassion, a deepening of the ability to actually get in the other what I might see in myself. And I also started realizing that I'm pretty consistent in terms of emotional ups and downs. I don't tend to take too long to get out of the funk and move on pretty quickly. But what I found during the pandemic, certainly during lockdown, is that it might take me a day or two longer than perhaps the half an hour or the hour or the day that it might have taken before. So I started noticing, where is my point of resilience? And even though I've got all the tools and the conscious awareness and the endless deep dives into shadow work and, all sorts of extraordinary things around this, I was no different, except perhaps that I'd trained myself to notice it and to look out for it and to be aware of it, so that I could put something in action to pedal back. And then the other thing is that I started walking with a group last year, and I've never been a massive walker, but I really got into it because it was freedom. It was the only way to get out. And today, I walk furiously with an amazing group of people, group of strangers who've become unbelievably close over that time. And that delivered a bunch of things for me. It delivered fabulous brain chemistry, physical health, resilience, but also human connection. So it fed the power of the emotional side of it as well, and connection. So all of those things, I think we're going to dip into in bits and bytes. But I also wanted to share a little point of, so Sean, I won't jump straight into this. I'll pass it back to you, and perhaps we can head off to Mentimeter and see how everybody's doing.
Yeah, no, I thought you would bring up our humorous conversation about Haagen-Dazs and how Haagen-Dazs.
I was about to do that, and then I thought I'd save it.
Oh man, I'm killing your thunder. I apologize.
That's okay. We can do that.
Well, I think we, sometimes it's difficult tough for some people to talk about emotions. You've surfaced this. I know a number of us have run across this before. I love infography type of things that bring to life certain things. Do you want to just give some context to this and why we threw it up here, Louise?
Yeah, recently I came across a fantastic podcast between Dr. Susan David, PhD, psychologist, Harvard, and Brene Brown. And I think they had such fun in their podcast that they had to create a part 2. And if you want to find the 2 podcasts, either search for Brene Brown's podcast and you'll find it there, or I'll post a link in a minute where I've put the 2 onto my blog. But what was interesting about that is that they are both emotions researchers, and they were talking about the toxicity of positive emotion. So in other words, whatever's going on, if it's hideous, just, rather think about what you've got to be grateful for. You're better off than somebody else. Or, life could be worse, or glossing over all of our feelings. But more importantly, Brene Brown, I think, mentioned that in her research, people had basically three types of emotions that they could identify. And I think it was angry, or she described it as pissed. The other one was kind of happy, and the other one was sad. Or I can't remember the exact three, but it was incredibly limiting. So I started digging into, and I've always used this with my clients. I've asked them to identify all of their emotions, because we are not the emotion. So I am not sadness itself. I might be experiencing feelings of sadness, or I might be experiencing feelings of frustration, or I might be feeling, fear, but it doesn't mean I am fear. And I think often we label ourselves with this, these two little words, I am, as if that is all we're capable of, even in the moment. And whenever I've worked with clients, I've said, okay, you have fear, and what else? So you have fear, you have trepidation, maybe there's a bit of excitement, maybe there's a bit of, sometimes we can have a myriad of emotions that we label as one thing. And we get stuck in that space of identifying ourselves as that thing. So this is a brilliant little app. It's called All the Feels. And you can actually download the app and track your emotions during the course of the day. And I'm glad I found it, because I've asked clients to do this manually before, so that they get to make friends with all of their emotions and embrace them all. And, finally, there's a little app for this. And I think you can even send the results to somebody else. I haven't tried it out myself. But I thought we'd use it in our first Menti, just to dig in and have a look. And I'm going to read the first question. If you wouldn't mind going over to Menti, you'll find the first question. And let's just jump straight into this.
So just, I guess to cue people up, I don't know if there's a second screen that you have, either on mobile or on another screen. I'll leave this open for a second, and then it's pretty simple, menti.com, and then put the number in.
Perhaps we can put the number into the chat. Let me just see if I can do that for you. Here we go.
Let me know if anybody has challenges. I know one of the things, it will anonymize the emotions, obviously, but we'd love to create an artifact coming out of this that just, compiles both the morning and the afternoon session in terms of what the collective guild thought.
So, right, if you headed over there, you'll see the first question is, what emotions have you experienced over the last year? So the idea here is just to name them. So good, bad, or the ugly, it doesn't really matter. That, as Sean said, they are nominalized. And enter as many words or phrases as you'd like. Think of the highs, the lows, the things that you remember as striking you as either unusual or extreme, or perhaps more of it than normal, or less of it than normal, things that you remember. And I think, Sean, if you wouldn't mind just chucking up that emotions wheel again, so that we've got a little reference point if people are searching for words.
There we go.
I'm not sure how well you can see that.
It's such a well-designed thing. These things just take off online when you do them right. I have to believe this is being seen by millions of people in the world.
Yeah, and cognitively we know this stuff. Most people are, can wrap words around. The secret here is, how do we drop from our heads or our cognitive understanding of something into our hearts, and acknowledge the feelings? And I think that that's really what it's all about.
I'm inventing verbs as we go here, Louise.
Tell me. I could use.
I don't know if Groundhog Dayed is a verb, but I thought it was appropriate. I don't know if...
Yeah, I use that term a lot. And if people would say, "How are you doing?" and I'd say, "Same, but different," or groundhoggy. I'm going to head over there and just open up the. Oh, we're starting to see some lovely things coming through. Sean, would you like me to share my screen?
Yeah, I'll take this down. So I think we've got a readout of what people have, right?
Yeah, and I think it'd be nice just for everybody to see it. Bear with me a second. I think you need to enable me
Oh, yeah.
to share.
There we go.
Great. I think I've left it open so that you can enter 10, 20, as many as you'd like. So I'd love as many as possible so that we can get a real sense of the range of emotions and obviously the consistency. I like this jamming. Who's jamming? Who was jamming? I love that. Oh, you don't have to answer.
It's I find love's an interesting one in the middle, right? It's the double side of crisis, I guess, right? We kind of reappraise maybe what we learn to enjoy or like or value more.
And appreciate, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if we can connect, so I guess what would be a great follow-on question for the answers that you put in, and we won't run that right now, but something just to perhaps take away with you and ask yourself is, how deeply did you drop into those feelings? How many of them did you side dance, move out of the way of, try to get over and move into something else? How many of them did you acknowledge deeply and just accept the fact that you had that feeling? I'd really recommend this double podcast with Dr. Susan Brown and Brene Brown, Dr. Susan David and Brene Brown, simply because it'll just give you a real sort of in-depth insight into emotions and how to actually sink deeply into them and acknowledge them. Because I think that's part of resilience, without a doubt, is the ability to actually acknowledge how we feel. We don't have to stay there and we don't have to be the emotion, but certainly to acknowledge it and to work our way through it. And through doing that, we build that muscle of resilience. Is everybody comfortable with me coming out of that?
I don't know if this is the right time for a question for you, Louise, but we saw, I think, generally the better side of most business leaders. They treated the whole person in most cases, with some exceptions. But I listened to the podcast that you had mentioned, and they talk about toxic positivity, right? I think that was one of the themes behind it. Did we candy coat too much of what was happening around us? Like, do we feel, have we been coddled through all of this? And maybe we would have been wise to have been at least, more alerted to the threat.
It's a really good question, Sean. I don't think we did. I think we started unraveling the words that we were used to using. So I think the toxic positivity that we built our business environments, our cultures on. I mean, hustle, grit, and grind. I mean, if you just listen to the words grit and grind, I mean, they are, they're really hard, gritty, grindy words, right? You get a bit of grit in your shoe when you're running, and you certainly feel it, even if it's, a grain of sand. So for me, really, what we need to be doing is dancing with life. We need to be more agile. And I think a lot of the language leading up to the pandemic, I'm a great one for tracking language. It says a lot about what's going on in societies and in cultures around the world. And we didn't have incredibly healthy language around business about, hustling, grit and grind. I mean, those are the three that just stuck with me. I did a lot of conversations on camera with business leaders straight into the pandemic, simply because I wanted to, share what other people were up to around the world with my community, in the hope that it would give them some ideas about anything that they might be stuck with. And I actually interviewed a dean of a business school, and we were discussing this shift in language. Grit and grind and hustle. Yes, I think the hustle still exists, But if we are so brittle, we will break. And I think that's one of the things that really became clear for me. And I think that the people who were more brittle during the last year reached some sort of rock bottom. They reached that point of bounce. And as that beautiful quote that we started with said, it's really when we meet that point of no return that we discover our resilience. In other words, we can't train for it, we can't prepare for it. It's not a cognitive exercise. We discover how we need to learn and grow when we meet the inextricable fate of our point of bounce. I'll leave it at that. It sounds a bit bizarre.
And I thought we'd have a level setter here too. Like I think there's various points of view out there. You had an interesting one for me when we were prepping for our session in terms of what resilience is, because certain people think it's a character trait or a personality trait, and you certainnly coached me away from that. And I think you referred to the Marcus Buckingham kind of thing. Do you want to top line a thought on a resilience, or should we go through the next couple slides on it?
Yeah, I will say that from a behavioral science perspective, it's not a personality trait. We know that. So there's a lot of research into that, and there's a lot of stuff to back it up. But I think if we listen to even the word resilient sounds hard. It doesn't sound like a mutable, agile kind of thing, action or behavior. It sounds hard, and it's rooted in something that is, if I think of stiff upper lip and, post-war Britain and, or the US or whatever it might be around, we've all been through extraordinary times in society, and resilience is the thing that happens afterwards. It's not a personality trait. In other words, it's not as if some people are born with it and others just don't have it, and they've got to try and find it. It's something we can all have if we work at it and build that resilience muscle, so to speak. And then I think let's dig into this, Sean.
Yeah, let's debunk some myths, because I think there's some common ones out there. Ones about gender and age. People can pick their lot in terms of gender here, but it certainly seems to be a very extensive study that was done. Thousands of people. Generally, it's a soft between men and women. Surprised by that, Louise, or not?
Nothing surprises me, Sean.
I love it. And I know there's a COVID factor here that I would have for sure thought teens, young adults would have been disproportionately affected and perhaps thought of themselves maybe as less resilient coming throughout this. But as you look at it, it's a pretty even battle between all ages. In fact, the oldest crew, if you were really to dissect little margins of it, say they're probably the most resilient, and they've probably been most affected by this. So just interesting.
I think one should also, sorry to just chuck something in there, Sean, but we also need to look at suicide rates amongst young people, because I think we're seeing, I don't know, I'd like to dig into this research a little rather than taking it at face value, because I think we've seen quite a rise in especially young men up to about 16 to 23, I think it is, the last report I saw.
Yeah. There were two conclusions from Marcus's research, though, right? If you're exposed to a lot of kind of different type of things, it makes you more resilient. It's almost like personal training, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I almost think of sort of resilience as having 4 parts to it, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit from a broader perspective. But if we think of it as the power of resilience, or each of these elements adding to your ability to build that muscle of resilience. One is the power of action, how to create stronger physical resilience. The other one is the power of connection, how to deepen our connections through unconditional positive regard for others. The power of our emotions, how to build emotional resilience by managing ourselves better. So know thyself and then get thyself the hell out of the way kind of thing. And then the power of our minds, developing a mental resilience by choosing a positive mindset. So that almost comes into conscious choice. What do I choose despite how I think or feel? And all of those, each one of them is a deep topic. But I think if we can think along those lines and pay attention to those aspects of ourselves, then we can get better at doing this every day.
And certainly the last part of the research was certainly they dealt with kind of different workplace environment changes. If you had a lot of them, maybe not surprisingly, you became much more resilient, right? If you were affected because you were a first line worker, emergency worker, you probably were more inclined to say that you're more resilient, and it's probably based on the urgency of something. And when you're faced with a crisis, maybe it, it doesn't feel so crazy after you've faced it once, twice, and 3 times.
And also you're doing something that is meaningful and has a positive outcome for others. So service plays a big part in that.
Agreed. And so just going back to kind of our description from before, it's a reactive state, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know about everybody else, but I would like something that was a lot more sure than having to reach a point of bounce that I'm not quite sure where that is. It would be quite useful. But we've all experienced things in our lifetimes where we've discovered how resilient we are. And yeah, I don't think there's much more that we can add to that.
So there is a lot of, if you just even look up image searches and resilience, there's a lot of connotation around bounce points and points of bounce. Is there a bounce here, or is it much more of a climbing a mountain and going down a mountain? it's a point, I mean, bounce sounds very vibrant, doesn't it? It sounds vibrant and full of energy. And we don't bounce back, interestingly enough. We are forever, inextricably changed by the experience of finding that point of resilience. And the key thing is that we learn from our experience, taking into consideration a lot of things that we talked about. If we can actually get comfortable with our emotions and sit with them and deeply accept that we're experiencing something rather than just trying to push it aside, what we come out of is something that actually builds resilience. It makes us stronger, which is kind of the old adage that, what doesn't hurt you makes you stronger. But we're not looking to be brittle strong. We're looking to be agile strong. We're looking to be, have that agility, not only in how we deal with things, but a deep emotional agility. And there's some great, so I'm not sure about the bounce back ability. It's a bounce forward ability, and it's probably very soft and quite, sometimes it can be slow. But once we start moving forward with those learnings, with that deeper understanding of ourselves, of course, we are changed forever, and we're better off in the future. And so I'm not too sure if we want to have the crowd engage us here if they're comfortable, but when in our lives have we experienced at least one of those low points? What happened? I'm not too sure if we want to share anything here. I know for myself, this pandemic thing, I'll just in the small bit of sharing is just, I find knowing, if I dial back to March 2020 and I thought to myself, how long will we be in this? Even as a rational optimist, I would not have predicted we would be where we are right now. I would have thought we would be much further along. And so part of my bounce, I think it's probably been much more of a gradual decline, right? It's been like when is this going to stop? And when can I actually get out of my track pants into some jeans or a suit again? I don't know if you have personal observations or if any of our people coming in today have some observation about what their experience has been like.
I had one. I read an article from a journalist who's had experience of working in war zones really early on in this, and it stuck with me because his experience was he was saying, and I must have read it in April 2020, he was saying, you've got to think about being in this for the long haul. And he said 18 months at that point, and he was talking about being shelled and attacked and, you know, uber lockdown compared to what most of us must have experienced. And I think looking now 13 months on, that's really helped manage my expectations about how long this would be. And there's something else I was just looking up today about the kind of about this time frame, and somebody was talking about kind of post event. So a psychologist, a journalist and broadcaster who's doing a session in the UK for Action for Happiness next week, and she was talking about post event trauma. So it's not the kind of bounce back immediately afterwards, but all of those reintegration into society, the kind of hugging strangers for the first time, the going to something and not worrying about whether you're going to pass an infection on to your elderly parents, you know, for example. It's those kind of hangovers that and she was talking about it from experience of being a psychotherapist and her own health issues, but that so with experience, she was talking about the need to think about a kind of a longer hangover from some of these traumas that I think is really important as we think both about ourselves and about our communities and others that we serve in some of this. Sorry,
it's such an important point, Esme. Thank you, because it is a hangover, really. And I think what we're realizing is that the hangover is less heavy and debilitating if we're able in the moment to actually acknowledge how we feel and deal with it at the time, rather than it, you know, otherwise it does come back to bite us, you know, and it's not just a bite, it's a constant nip, you know, as we move forward. It's really, it's much more difficult, it's much, yeah. And I think the biggest thing that plays into that is uncertainty. Human beings like certainty. We are pattern makers. We want to know what's coming so that we can plan for it. Good, bad, and different, you know. Of course, if it's bad, we don't want to know. Sometimes we put our heads in the sand. That's the same thing as ignoring our own emotions, right? So, yeah, I like what you said about it preparing you, you know, creating that expectation. And of course, we're only as disappointed as we expect something that is not proven yet, right?
Oh, I know, and I know, Nathan, you just raised your hand. Maybe just a quick thought.
Yeah, a thought on this notion of I've lost it. This quick recovery. The thing that's really struck me lately is I mean, from a U.S. perspective, it seems like the entire world is now ready for this to be over and anxious for this to be over. And the thought occurs to me, that's not what causes it to be over. And I'm wondering if there's, I remember a little bit of wisdom. I think it was from POWs in Vietnam. Some interview, I'm going to remember a bit of it, but the question was, who had the hardest time as a POW? Who was least likely to make it through the process, through the experience? And the person being interviewed, the answer was, that's easy, the optimists. They were sure they'd be home by Christmas, and then they weren't.
Yeah.
And then they were sure, and then they weren't. And the ones who were so sure that it was about to be over were the ones who didn't make it through because it lasted so much longer than they thought it would be. And with things like, you know, the out of control infection rate in India, and there's no telling, you know, how many variants are going to evolve out of that and what's going to happen. Everyone is so ready for this to be over. What if it's not? What are we doing for our resilience if everyone is assuming that it's back to normal today, or it's about to be back to normal next month or July or whatever. It just seems like that's setting us up for a new round of trauma that's somewhat self-inflicted.
And Nathan, thank you so much for that. I thoroughly agree with you. I think Viktor Frankl's work around this is, I'm sure most people are familiar with it, and it's probably worth reading again, going through something like this ourselves. And thanks, Esme, for bringing up the war corresponding reference, because I think people who have experienced that type of trauma have a great perspective on it. Sean, I see some hands are raised, and I'm just wondering, you know, our breakout sessions might be great timing to actually share some stories and allow for everybody to get a chance to do that.
I think so. I think we got a couple of different slides here just in terms of how to cope with it, I think, because I think the flip side of, you know, diagnosing it is coping. I don't know if you want to just mention these quickly and then we'll get to our breakout.
Absolutely, and I think I jumped ahead of myself. I didn't realize the slide was in the deck. But yeah, these are the four sort of pillars of building resilience, as I mentioned before. And
it's funny, I mentioned to you the acronym was ACME, and then I threw Coyote and Roadrunner at you, and you were completely nonplussed by it. So yeah,
it doesn't mean much. Yeah, unfortunately, I'll try and connect the dots later. But yeah, I think the easiest place to start actually is the power of action, and action really is all about our physicality, our physical health, and there's some amazing things we can do, just little things. So really, we're talking about epigenetics. So genetics, we kind of developing an understanding around with CRISPR over the last few years and things like that. But epigenetics is really the interesting part. That's the bit we have direct control over, unless you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars to alter your genes and somebody is willing to do it. So epigenetics, of course, means epi, it sits above, and pretty much everything that goes on in our lives sits in that space and affects our brain chemistry. It affects our resilience. Without a doubt, all of these things feed into resilience. So power of action, you know, getting out, moving, stretching, actually becoming more body conscious, rather than just treating this thing like a, you know, some sort of, you know, weird suit that we're wearing for a short period of time, and it fails us, and the older we get, the more it fails us, right? But actually honoring it and being more body conscious in our own bodies. And this goes back to what we were discussing before, and this vital comment about the fact that if we're living into optimism, if we're living into the future, or the hope of something being different to what it actually is, without actually recognizing it is what it is. I mean, that's one of the greatest powers of resilience, is acknowledging where we are. And it's about the ability to be present. And it's not just in our emotions and our minds, body, mind, soul, that it's deeply present in our bodies. I mean, feel the earth under our feet, understand the sensations, and don't ignore them in our bodies. So, you know, we always talk about getting to the gym or going for walks or runs, or, you know, the physical activity. Yes, I mean, do all of that. It changes our brain chemistry enormously, but do it for other reasons too, to actually get deeply connected in our bodies. The power of connection, we are hardwired for connection. We're hardwired to be liked, to be loved, to connect with others, to build bridges in every possible way. So we've got to be taking care of that. And we've actually had some research to show even connecting with others over Zoom is better than no connection at all. So there is some benefits to all of this crazy screen time, especially if you're in lockdown and really restricted in terms of, and you know, building connection wherever you can. And sometimes we have to make an effort to do that, because it's the last thing we feel like, is trying to build bridges with new people. But it serves us so unbelievably well. So that's another little, and I always think of these four pillars as being insurance. You know, do this stuff. And when you reach a point of difficulty, it'll be a lot easier. It doesn't mean it'll go away, or that the problems will go away, or they won't exist anymore, they'll just disappear, or perhaps we'll move into a new moon and things, the whole world will shift, Rob. But what it does mean is that we will get through it much better off than if we hadn't. Of course, the power of emotions, that positive regard for others through connection and for ourselves, you know, doing service, recognizing our emotions. I think that little emotions wheel is really worth running for a month, you know, tracking one's own emotions so that we get some insight into ourselves, because everything is about self-knowledge. If we know ourselves well, we know when we're getting to a tipping point, we know when we've gone too far, we know when it's time to pull it back and do something to actually nurture ourselves in some way, shape or form. And the power of the mind, you know, that's critical. So just because we think something's true doesn't mean it is. And, you know, a lot of the work that we do around the, you know, getting conscious or being conscious leaders is all about making choices despite what we think or feel, because our thinking and our feelings can change in 2 seconds. It may feel very real, very urgent, extreme, but we know, having looked back at different times in our lives and different, you know, thinking or feelings around things, that can change enormously, you know, in a nanosecond. So not putting too much faith in that, and then doing the right thing for ourselves anyway.
I think you've already talked about what the epigenetics side of it was, and I think there's kind of 8 different resilience elements that I think Samantha had surfaced. I'm not too sure if, I know I haven't got a lot of sleep lately. Some of these I do pretty well. I don't know. Do we have any research on which is most important throughout this, or are they all important, Louise?
Yeah, you know, they fall into the 4 categories that we talked about anyway, and each one of these, there's a lot of data around them. You know, I always laugh when I see people say get, you know, 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and the older I get, the less sleep I need. It's really bizarre. I don't know who gets 8, 9 hours sleep, except teenagers, or perhaps some unusual people that I know. But yeah, so each one of these is vital, and it's not so much quantity. It's all about quality, really, and discovering what works for you. Nutrition, of course, don't eat junk. You know, it's addictive. It doesn't feed our brains or our emotions very well. I think we've covered the physical, the focus. Well, of course, we have great focus if we get great sleep and we eat well and we feed our brains, we feed our bodies. Time in, that's really about contemplation, you know, being able to sit comfortably within ourselves, and some lovely practices. And the reason why they're called practices is we never quite master them, like yoga or meditation, or somewhere where we just sit. And you know, meditation could be painting. It could be perhaps getting into the garage and knocking something together. Anything that's meditative. It doesn't need to be a formal meditation if that doesn't appeal to you. Downtime, absolutely. Try and stay away from too many screens. We've got too much of that anyway. Playtime, vital. You know, we got to laugh. I think at least one decent belly laugh a day is a good thing. If there are not enough funny people around, they're all good company. We've got all of these laughing Buddhas, I should say, and coaches on YouTube. I'm sure you could find something that would give you a chuckle. And then, of course, you know, circling back to connection and making sure that we build all of that in. So yeah, just tiny little increments of everything every day.
So you had a really interesting tool I saw here that will be the basis of, I guess, our breakout. Do you want to describe what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is Lumina Learning is an award-winning, I hate the word psychometrics. I guess personality profiling is a better way, and that's their language as well. It's based on the Big 5 in Jung, and they have a bunch of different applications. The Splash is their foundation product, and they also do EQ and, you know, leadership and teams and a whole bunch of stuff associated with it. I think one of the most fun things they did recently was to put 40,000 students at a university in Mexico through this before they realigned their courses and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And what they do is they measure us, our 3 personas. So our underlying persona, who we are at our most natural, where we're most comfortable. It's not always the side that we show others. They measure our everyday persona. That's how we're showing up. And that, of course, would change depending on the group of people that we're working with, or clients, or the environment that we find ourselves, or situation that we find ourselves in. And then they have something called an overextended persona. I call it overcooked, because this for me is deeply unconscious behavior. It's when our buttons are being pushed, we're just reacting. We're definitely not doing the conscious thing of what do I choose. And this little mini app is a bit of fun. We use it in a lot of engagements. And you can actually share your splash with somebody else and compare it, which you can perhaps do after the session if you'd like. But we're going to use it for the foundation of our breakout. I don't know if you want to describe that, Sean, or are you happy for me to do that?
I think it's just here. I think just keeping this slide up maybe for the language that's on the tool might be important for people. But and given our timing, maybe what do you think, Louise? Do strength and weakness together?
Yeah, and I'm kind of reluctant to call anything a weakness, but an area to develop.
Yeah, sorry, you're right.
So perhaps a brittle point for us rather than a bouncy point. So just identifying something that has really helped you over the last year. I think it's nice to use the last year as a context because it's so real for all of us still. It's, you know, it's very much alive for all of us. And to pick a strength that has really carried you through well, or that you've discovered is a point of resilience for you over this time, and something that you feel has perhaps been a little tricky, something that you might want to develop. And if we just, even if you just work with the main sort of themes, big picture thinking would be visionary, inspirational, next door to it, along those same sort of lines, being extroverted, being able to reach out, connect with people, outcome focused, being able to drive stuff through, things that you've got your mindset on, discipline driven, actually having the wherewithal to support all of that and get it done, not just drive it. Being down to earth, more cautious. Actually, we've done some global research about how our collective behaviors have changed over the last year, and we've all become a touch more cautious, interestingly enough. Not unsurprising, I guess. And then more observing, introverted, measured, more intimate. So perhaps pick one area that's really supported you and another area that you would like to develop for yourself.
So I'm going to go off screen in about 5 seconds. So process that visual or take a picture of it if you need to. Some people take actually their phone out and take a picture of it if it helps them. It's tough when you get into chat on Zoom. And I will go off screen and set ourselves up into a number of rooms. I know it's coming up on the hour. My hope is people still have about 15 minutes if they can afford to spend the time. I'm going to put us into, what do we think?
Rob's saying he hasn't, yeah.
What do we think? 6 rooms, Louise?
Yeah, let's do that. And perhaps if there are people who have to leave, and I forgive us for overrunning on the time. Thank you so much for being here. And let's perhaps let those people exit and see how many people we're left with. And perhaps if you're able to stay, can I just see some hands and then we'll know what to do with the rooms. Okay, great. So yeah, if we can do 2s, that'll be great. Sean, if it's
you want to do 2s?
If we can, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to set up 8 breakout rooms, which allows for one to maybe, I'll be the hanger on that maybe ends up lurking in somebody's room. So,
and if anybody gets stuck and they're on their own, please put your hand up and come back to the main room, and we'll make sure that you land up, not sitting on your own for a little while.
So we'll do this for about 10 minutes, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And there we go. I'll be here in case people aren't able to make it into their rooms.
Just share, it's anonymized, so I'd love a couple of sentences, you know, some ideas from you, what you've learned about yourself, and sharing with somebody else. It's never enough time. 10 minutes is nothing for two people. Just, you know, sometimes in even really actively listening to somebody else, you know, a whole bunch of things just really settle in us, you know, give us that recognition of ourselves at the same time. So if there was anything that that really struck you, I'd love to understand what that was. I'm going to head over to Menti and see if we've got anything. Is everybody has?
No, I think you need to refresh. I think you need to move the presentation forwards.
There we go. So tell me if you've got it now.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. I think, shall I share my screen
Yep.
so that we can see those popping up?
I was very brief, and then it only allowed me to submit one. I feel so.
Oh, shortchanged.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I wonder if it's. Let me just let me pop back and see if there's something I can do about that. Okay, I've changed the settings. Sean, if you want to pop back and.
Sure. No, that'd be great. And then throw up your screen. I'm very curious to know what people say. I'm starting to really like Mentimeter.
Yeah, I like the scrolly one. Not quite sure what you call it, but yeah.
If you want to focus on any of them, you know, Louise, you can just click on each one and it will come up in the center of the screen.
Oh gosh, I just learned something. That's brilliant. Thank you, Steve. I've been doing this for over a year. Okay, so maybe that's my belly laugh of the day. I love that. Thank you. And how do I get rid of it?
Click on another one or click on the empty space.
Okay, great. That's brilliant. Okay, and somebody else got their first belly laugh of the day as well. So awesome. Okay, are we all comfortable with that? Is everyone done? We'll share all of this, I think, after the second session today, Sean, once we've got a bit more data.
My hope is we'll be able to create something out of this, like maybe a curated guild view of what resilience means to all of us. So, Louise, do you want to grab? I mean, I was going to use a baseball term here, but the ninth inning or the last quarter or whatever. I've got a couple of housekeeping notes, but any wrap-up comments in terms of resilience before we all get on with our merry lives?
Okay, I should have thought of something unbelievably profound to say, but for me, it's really sinking into what is, you know, sinking into an acknowledgement of who am I, what am I going through. I'm not trying to run away from our feelings in any way. Doesn't mean we need to stay there, but to acknowledge. And I think that through that process of seeing and acknowledging where we're at, we're able to move through things so much easier. And look, everybody's going through a tough time. I'm actually in South Africa at the moment, and not a single member of the public has been vaccinated yet. And we've got one of those vicious variants. So, you know, who knows when I'll be able to get in the plane and go somewhere else again. But, you know, sitting in that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, you know, it doesn't feel too good. So it is what it is. There's not a lot of power I have over it. And I think, yeah, it's just a deep acceptance, and then putting other small things in place, like taking a walk, eating well, sleeping well, having a good chat, picking up the phone, reaching out when it's the last thing we feel like doing, connecting to somebody else, and guaranteed we're going to feel better afterwards. So yeah, I'll leave you with that short ramble, and thank you all so much for being here.
Well, I definitely want to thank Louise for imparting all of her thoughts here. And just I was talking to Esme as we came back from break. It's just like, it's really good to take time out and do kind of something very, very human. I tend to spend a lot of time on Zoom, and it tends to be with 20 people, 40 people, 80 people. And it's good to actually just connect with a few people today. So my hope is you got that wafer thin slice of connection that may give you some fuel for the rest of the day. My only housekeeping notes across the guild is we're going to do more of these things. We've got one, in fact, we've got one at 4 o'clock today on the very same topic with just Louise's Canadian equivalent, Samantha, or Samantha's South African equivalent has just done your topic today. So we're going to have one at 4. It'll have a very similar layout, but I'm sure Samantha will have her own stylings in terms of how to approach this subject. So feel free to join if you want more. And our next Atelier will be on May 21st. So we wanted to do 2 in very close concession with each other. We are launching the Foundry. So for those that don't know what the Foundry is, we feel like there should be a teaching / co-crafting / learning community inside the guild. And so Chris and Doyle will be launching the Foundry. I don't know exactly what they're going to cover off, but it's going to be on May 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern time for those that are keeping count at home. And then last couple things are unbeknownst to some people. We don't all go braggy and crazy about it, but our guild over the last month has grown by about 20%. We're really hitting this organic phase of growth where people are coming to us. We're not coming to them. And with that in mind, we're really upticking our Medium presence. So if you're interested in authoring an article about sense making or authoring an article about futurism, starting next week, our Tuesdays will be themed around sense making, and our Sundays will be themed around futurism and getting ahead of the future scenarios, a whole bunch of different things that entails. So please, I'll probably summarize this and get this out to everybody, but get your name on a roster. We've got the next 25 weeks trying to figure out who's doing what. And just if you could have any passion, you want to write 1,000 words about something, we would love for you to be involved. My hope is you enjoyed today. Tell us if you did, tell us if you didn't, and we'll make sure that all of our stuff is even better next time. But really, I want to thank Louise for pulling it all together and having to deal with me in terms of corralling some of our resources today. So, so thank you so much.
And thank you, Sean. I mean, gosh, amidst all sorts of extraordinary technological challenges. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Hope to see
Bye
you
to everybody.
soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Sean, will I see you at 4?
All right. Well, doing the double. Wow. Very good.
Will you be there?
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'll see you at 4.
I may be from the Apple store, but I'll be there.
That'll be good to get out and about. Good to get out and about.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks, Louise.
Bye, Jonathan.
Good stuff.
I'm not sure if Ronan's frozen.